The Marijuana Tax Act criminalized marijuana in 1937. The press was describing it as killer weed from Mexico.
Right.
And when they introduced the act, it was introduced through the side door of Congress, going through the House Ways and Means Committee. So it didn't have to be sent directly to the floor and introduced as law.
Right.
After the enactment, William G. Woodard, the attorney for the American American Medical Association, he said the entire fabric of federal testimony was tabloid sensationalism. No real testimony had been heard, and that the Marijuana Tax Act was passed in ignorance and could possibly deny the world the potential medicine in marijuana. He also continued that the only reason the AMA had not come out sooner was that he had realized 2 days before the hearings that the plant Congress intended to outlaw was cannabis, the benign substance used in America to treat scores of illnesses for over 100 years.
Wow, including alcohol addiction, right?
Right, and heroin addiction. You know, in 1857, it was listed in the U.S. Pharmacopoeia.
And how was it listed? Did you say for heroin addiction? What were they using it for in the 1850s?
Oh, it was medicine.
Yeah, it was in 1850. It was listed on the U.S. dispensary. The official list of recognized medical drugs and commercial preps were available in pharmacies.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and even the judges from the DEA are saying that marijuana, including Francis Young, he said marijuana in its natural form is one of the safest therapeutically active substances known to man.
Yep.
Right.
You know, and these are the people that are hired to convict. And how many times is the government? You know, the government says, "Oh, well, we need more testing." Well, how much more testing do they need? They've had that plant in Mississippi since 73, 74, at the University of Mississippi. They've been testing it for eons now. They already know the effects. The government has patents on it.
Well, they
if it
know.
didn't have bona fide medical properties, they wouldn't have patents on it.
They know.
And they wouldn't be dispensing it to patients across the United States since the 70s as a medicine.
But just a second, I know those patents, but I'm thinking as you're speaking, how can you patent a plant?
They actually patent the cannabinoids in it, the specific cannabinoids, and to be able to reproduce them and use them in a specific fashion, I guess. Even though I don't even, that's like, all right, can I patent a tomato for a specific tomato soup?
Or tomato sauce?
Yeah. You know, none of it makes any sense. It's all just game for them to make more and more money. You know, and with everything that marijuana can fit into cannabis. In fact, I don't like to say cannabis. I don't like to say hemp. I think that when people say hemp, they're drawing a line in the sand. Because what's the difference between hemp and cannabis?
Nothing.
No, there's
one's a boy and one's a girl.
No, that's not true. Hemp is hemp. There's many different varieties of hemp.
Right.
There's hemp that gets you high, and then there's hemp that don't get you high.
Right.
You know, it's actually all cannabis. You know, the word cannabis comes from Old Hebrew. It used to be called cannabosum in Hebrew, and it was the sacred sacred herb of the Hebrews going back thousands of years.
It's kosher. It's kosher.
Look up
Cannabis is kosher, yeah.
Look up cannabosum, the sacred
sacred healing herb of the Jews.
Yeah, sacred healing herb of the Jews.
It's not just Jews. You see it in all religions.
Yeah, no,
in the Vedas.
Yeah, and it goes
Zoroastrians.
It goes back to Zoroastrian. We're going back like 4,000 or 5,000 years. The Zoroastrians that was their sacrament.
Right,
and the Shivite yogis, it was their sacrament.
Is the holy anointing oil.
Right, of the Hebrews. That's cannabosum.
Yes.
Right, and if you check out the Shivite yogis, you know, people talk about Shiva, the god Shiva.
Right.
Well, the plant what they call ganja over there, or Shivite. The Shivite yogis call it a sacrament, and so did the Zoroastrians and the early Hebrews. It was the sacred anointing oil of the Hebrews. All the ancient kings were of the Hebrews were anointed with the cannabisum oil, and Christ, when they say the wise men brought frankincense, myrrh, and gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Frankincense and myrrh are two of the main ingredients in making the sacred oil of the Jews, and more than likely, Christ was anointed with marijuana oil.
Right.
Now all the Christians will go crazy because I said Jesus was anointed with marijuana oil. But if they knew history, they'd know I'm right.
Mhm. Well, back to the Hindus. They once a year the Hindus gather. They gather for Mahashivaratri.
Right.
And that's where they worship Shiva. And they say that her image with the half closed eyes are the result, or his are the result of meditation and using marijuana.
Yeah.
In India, it's illegal to have marijuana, even though it's viewed as a sacred substance. But all the restrictions are lifted during Shivaratri, and the community provides food and drink and marijuana as a spiritual aid to the holy men for the duration of the celebration.
Isn't that something? Those superstitious Hindus, they're going to cut a break for... I mean, it's the IMF that comes in and says, we're not going to give you any Federal Reserve notes or loans unless you comply with our specifications that you make hemp illegal, because they got their eye on pretty much sucking the equity out of the country. And the first step to do it is to make marijuana illegal, cannabis illegal. Before Egypt had all its problems, one of the first things they did some months before was go into the traditional hash houses where for centuries, traditionally...
They smoked hookahs.
Yeah. And probably that would be a good place to discuss politics, and then you're in a heightened state of awareness where you could come to more solutions. And so what better way to kind of break the knees of a culture than to say this ancient herb can't be used?
Right.
We have to break now just for station identification, and then we'll continue.
Okay.
Just quickly, this is WIOFLP, Woodstock 104. It is Pot Talk with Joe Barton and Paula Gloria. Now back to the show.
Okay, you can speak now.
By the way, if anybody wants to call in, it's 679-9104, and we're speaking to Kim, who we met at the pot parade, talking about how legalization is not the way to go. You really want to go for repeal of an unconstitutional law, which
That's
actually
right.
all laws are null and void if they're not constitutional.
And we want all marijuana prisoners released, and we want all arrests stopped.
Yes, we do.
Have you ever been in prison, Kim?
I've been in county jail a few times.
And what was that like?
It sucked.
It was jail. It was jail.
Do you remember how old you were the first time?
The first time I went to jail was probably when I was about 18.
Wow.
And then I started catching drug charges. The first real drug charge that stuck on me was in 94. I caught a misdemeanor, and in 95 I caught a felony.
When you say you were targeted, once the ticket that comes, the ticket is the most dangerous, because at that point you have consented to the whole process, obviously under extreme duress, and people hardly realize that they're consenting when they're consenting.
Right. Well, had I known my rights at the time, I probably would have never, ever caught any type of criminal charges.
Right. That's why you're so enthusiastic about jury nullification?
Right, because criminal charges for any narcotic can cripple someone for life. it used to be on job applications, have you ever been convicted of a criminal offense in the past 5 years? And then it went to 7 years. And then it went to 10 years. And now it says, have you ever been? Well, I'm sorry, my charges from 94 and 95. Who cares? I did my time.
What kind of time did you have to do, and what kind of charge was it?
It was criminal possession with intent to sell.
Mm-hmm.
And I just did a few months and came out on probation. And I got violated on probation for smoking marijuana.
That's another trick they do, the violation on probation. That's a setup, Joe.
Yes. Well, what had happened was one Sunday morning I was walking my dog, and a loose dog came and jumped on him, and they started fighting, and there was no dog owner. They were both full-grown pit bulls. I could control my dog, but I couldn't control the other one, and he was really attacking my dog. So I was like, hey, somebody help me. So some neighbors came out, and they tried to grab the dog, but it didn't have a collar on or anything. So we're all trying to pull my dog around and keep my dog away from the other dog and call the cops and try to get animal control to stop this big dog fight. Well, the cops come and they sit in their car for like 20 minutes, and the dogs are really fighting. The dogs lock up neck to neck, and finally 2 cops come out of the cop car. One's white, one's black, and he says, hey, what are you going to... I said, listen, if you're not going to do anything, if you're just going to stand there, give me the mace. My kids were there. My neighbor's kids were there. You know, this is my neighborhood that I've been living in since 1996 when I moved to Albany. And so, you know everybody in your neighborhood. So people are trying to help, and it's all family out there. And the cop says, you know what, just shoot both the motherfuckers. So he puts the mace away, and he pulls out his gun. This is in the papers still.
We apologize for that. You have to watch your language on the radio, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry.
Go ahead.
So the cop, he pulls out the gun, and he shoots 5 shots. My dog runs. The other dog lays down on the sidewalk. I grab my dog. The cop pulls his gun on me, and he's like, put the dog down. And I'm like, no. And my friend circled me, and I kind of assessed my dog, and I noticed that they shot his toe off. And while the cops arguing with me over my dog, the other dog starts getting back up off the street. And mind you, there's probably about 40 or 50 people outside. And the cop pulls out his gun again in the middle of this crowd of people and shoots off 6 more shots. To make a long story short, they shot my dog in front of like 50 or 60 people. It was completely excessive force. There were 11 bullets shot, and they only found 10 bullets, which means there was an 11th bullet somewhere in somebody's side of their house somewhere, or traveled somewhere, because the cop was shooting reckless. And I wound up getting violated from probation for police contact and smoking marijuana.
Wow. That's terrible. What did the crowd do? What was... People came on the news and said the cops were using excessive force. They all got cleared. The city of Albany actually paid the bill for my dog to get his toe sewn back on. Oh, so the dog survived? Yeah, my dog survived. The other dog did not. Oh, dear. Right. You know, the police here in Albany are pretty barbaric. People, you know, when people say Albany, they think the capital, and because they've seen the building and the $1 million staircase, that we're living in, you know, a nice economic environment where everybody has stuff, but this is a very poor town. And there's a lot of crime up here, a lot of things happen. And the attention is not being brought out to what needs to, at these facts. You know, they want to draw attention to other areas. But Albany needs help. When people come and protest in Albany, there was a medical marijuana rally at the Capitol, and one of the assemblymen from the Bronx got up, and he said, you know, Albany's great. They don't have the problems that we have in the city. We have the same problems. You know, the same people are getting arrested. The same people are going to jail. The same people are losing their kids. You know, when is it going to stop? It's not just localized in New York City. It's across New York State from border to border.
It's across the country from border to border.
Right. And it needs to be addressed. It needs to be addressed on a national level. You know, we have all these different states that are pulling medical marijuana, a couple with recreational, and a couple hemp states now, but they're all different. All the laws are different, and none of these laws are supposed to exist to begin with, because cannabis prohibition is supposed to be repealed and nullified.
Right, and we should plan for a rally in Albany on the third week of July, and try for a Wednesday. If you do Monday, most of the legislature are coming back from a weekend, and they're all hung over from all that alcohol they've been drinking. So you're not going to really get through to fogged heads.
Right.
And Friday they want to leave early. Wednesday's probably the best day to get them to maybe listen to what we're saying.
Right, and there's permits available at the Capitol right there. You know, so everything can be done right there. You know, a stage can be set up right in the plaza area where the fountain is.
Yeah, we've done it a few times up there. I know where you're talking about. We've done it a few times up there, in that little park right behind the State House. Oh, right. I know where you're talking about. That's actually where we've done it. That's one of the best places to do it. Okay. Since you're up there, if you could hook up the date, and I'll work on getting us some bands. And if you know someone with a sound system... are they there in the summer, Joe? The legislature guys? Well, not always, but... What's your experience, Kim? Usually they clear out of here at the end of the session. It's a nice venue, I know that, but how to get the crowds that the bands would want? Would that be a good place? A real good, there's two other spots that they would really come to, because parking would be iffy on the weekday over there. Yeah. Because it would be metered parking. Yeah, that's the only problem. Right, but they have Corning Preserve, where they have all the Alive at 5 festivals. I don't know that. That's on the edge, like right next to the highway. And there's parking. Get those other drugs, because you can legalize marijuana today. It wouldn't end the overdose deaths by one person, because, as you all know, nobody dies from ingesting marijuana. It wouldn't reduce the number of people being infected by AIDS and hepatitis by one person, because that is going on with hard drug users using intravenous drug use. So we need to legalize it all. You want to be part of a revolution? This is literally a revolution. It's an educational revolution, but mark my words, it is a revolution nevertheless. We get what we want, it's going to change the world, and it's going to change it all for the better. So let's go down the march and have a great rally down at the other end. All these people get it behind the tickets, and then the person comes. So they should wait until these contingents go.
All right, everyone, we're about to take off. Right. So please get ready. I just want to end by saying, together, we will cut away the vines that are choking our cannabis plant. We will shelter the plant from the elements of big business and government that seek to trample it. And together, we shall plant the seeds of change. So much. Thank you very much. To the people. Nice. No. Nice. That's awesome. Your mic was on. Theater. How many would that hold? A lot. It's an entire park, and then they put out plastic lawn chairs, but then there's kind of like bleachers built into the hill. Wow. Sounds like a good place. Have you been at a concert? We'll come up. We'll come up on some one day, and we'll take a look at it with you. Okay. Soon, so we can plan. You have our number. Stay in touch with us. I will, definitely. And you have my number. Or I'll give it to you again. Well, call me. If you can give it on air, if you want people to call you. I don't know. Okay, do you want to give your? Okay, my number. It's 518-209-3137.
We can also people can follow us on Twitter at Capital Cannabis. That's CAPITOL Cannabis. And our website is AmericansForCannabis.com. And we're all over Facebook as well.
Wonderful.
I actually use Facebook because it's free.
Is it working for you?
It works to a certain extent, but I would like to localize it a little bit more and be able to have people in New York and in the immediate area. One thing I would like to do is maybe once a month hold a meeting at the Albany Public Library.
Yeah, that's nice to get a regular thing going. I used to work with a group, well, not as a public access producer. I used to really enjoy the guests from HEAL, Health Education AIDS Liaison, and they used to meet every Wednesday. I think when you get a weekly thing going, it builds up the momentum.
Right.
Like at the Pot Festival, you could see as you were speaking, a lot of light bulbs were going on. You really held the attention of that reporter from New York One, which is the Time Warner logo. So I guess.
Yeah, she actually aired it.
Oh, she did.
She did. We figured she wouldn't.
Actually, happy to see it. I was like, yay!
That's great. You saw it up in Albany?
Yes, she said that she was speaking on the various aspects of medical marijuana, recreational marijuana, and then she said that there were some people that wanted cannabis removed from the DEA's Controlled Substances Act, and then she said the Capital District Cannabis Consortium, and she aired the part where I said when people hear legalization, they don't know what that means. They hear the word and they're like, oh yeah, we think we can do whatever we want.
Well, that's wonderful news because we weren't expecting that would happen. Is there any way to get that archived to see it for our listeners? No, for our listeners. If you give me your
email, I could send you the link for it.
How can we get it out to all the people that are listening? Because you're also simulcasting now, I believe, right on the television too. So we're getting a reach on FM radio, and then also about what,
Woodstock television,
3,000 subscribers on cable.
Oh, great!
So how can you direct all of them to find it?
Let me try to find the link right now. Let me pull it up.
It would be, I was looking at NY1 because it had the Time Warner logo. I didn't used to notice that NY Young exclusively had the Time Warner logo.
Well, it didn't used to.
TWCnews.com.
What is it?
TWC.
TWC. Oh, wow. TimeWarnerCable.com.
Yep, at New York One.
At New York One. That is fantastic.
And then when you click on the video, it says the caption is Marijuana Advocates March Through Manhattan. And when you click on the video, it's going to tell you, if you're not subscribed, that you can watch it 10 times.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, as soon as I get home, I'm going to check it out because we're in an internet-free zone here right now. So it's squeaky clean.
Okay. But we were so excited to see it on the news because it was the first time in a long time that we've actually heard deschedule removed from the DEA's Controlled Substances Act and list.
Well, even though you're saying you're treading a lonely path because of all of these agencies, like Joe said, usually, the cop agencies that are kind of getting in on the new opportunity, it's something that I watched you turn people on. They would hear it, and it was, wow, that makes sense. And then you could feel the gears start to click.
Right, because the reality is every industry is already taxed and regulated. Cannabis fits in every industry. Why are we making these laws? Deschedule it. Let's do what we have to do. We're adults. We'll be responsible with our cannabis use.
Of course.
Most people will. And some people won't, but that's just human nature.
But it seems as though there's such a leap to making it the solution to all problems and making it so that you can tax it. I saw so many people there thinking, oh, this is a no-brainer. Legalize it and tax it, and everybody will be happy. The politicians will be happy, and the pot smokers will be happy. But you look at it, the pot smokers will be in jail or broke.
Right. And what they forget is if prohibition is repealed, it's going to be taxed anyway when you buy it at the store. Why does New York State deserve more than sales tax when we buy a product?
Right.
Yeah. Why do they deserve a $50 an ounce tax per ounce?
That's crazy.
Why do they don't deserve that.
I mean, and it's probably going to be even more when you have low quality and, so I was listening to people up in Canada who had multiple sclerosis, and this man said that the oil, because he had a very advanced case of multiple sclerosis, he said that was the only thing that would work. And when people are, getting their, government medications, I guess they take them just so they don't look like they're difficult people, but they throw them away. And they still cop on the streets to get what actually helps them.
Right. Who wants 3% THC?
Right. And we talk to people up there, up in Canada. When you get medical marijuana up there, they grind up the seeds and the stems in with the marijuana.
Wow.
Yeah. And
they throw it away and get it on the street.
Right. The person we were talking to said he takes it because he has it, and it has it comes in a bag and it's got a stamp on it. What he does is he throws away their marijuana and buys it on the street and puts his street marijuana in that bag.
The good stuff.
Yeah.
Well, I have a great friend in Canada, Kevin Moore, and he's a big advocate for repeal.
Yeah.
He's part of Canadians for Cannabis.
How does he tell you it's going on up there?
He says it's terrible. They're taking away the grow rights, and it's just ridiculous. And the only freedom for a patient is to grow their own medicine.
Right.
And that's the bottom line. People want to, first, it's a lot of audacity, for someone to say that only a patient has the right to consume marijuana.
Right.
Who says that only a patient is allowed to use marijuana? They're no different than us.
Right.
The cannabinoids, we produce these chemicals in cannabis in our body naturally. We have the cannabinoid 1 receptors, the cannabinoid 2 receptors.
And it's also, it's been proven that if you just smoke marijuana all the time, you limit a lot of your chances of getting some of these diseases.
Right.
They know that to be true. They did research, a scientific study on smoking, and they tested people who smoke cigarettes, and they, so many thousand people to see the results of lung cancer, and they did the same with marijuana smokers. And they did the same tests and research with people who didn't smoke anything. And the results came out that the people who smoked marijuana had less lung cancer than the people who didn't smoke anything.
Right. Well, cancer is environmental. It's not just a genetic disease, it's an environmental disease.
Yep, we agree on
Giulio
that one.
Simoncini, a great oncologist in Italy, wrote a book called Cancer is a Fungus, and he feels we could advance a lot more if there wasn't so much money involved with chemotherapy and radiation.
Right.
And in his research, he found that not only is it a fungus, it's what's the fungus called again?
Candida.
Candida. And they found that for people who keep their pH level at a certain thing, like what is it, baking soda. If you drank baking soda every day, alkaline, right? If you keep your system alkaline, the chances of getting cancer, or even if you have beginning stages of cancer, you can actually get rid of it by keeping your system alkaline. So
then there's sunlight therapy too.
Okay.
Yeah, Simoncini. You might want to read Simoncini's book, "Cancer is a Fungus." Right, that's what it is.
Yeah, Tullio, Tullio, Simoncini, Simoncini. It's a beautiful book, and it's so well written. He had this discovery about baking soda and water, and he managed, in the south of Italy, he had enough seniority in the hospital that he was able to experiment, and talks about a case where a mother just wanted her little boy who had cancer to be able to come out of his coma so she could say goodbye to him. So Simoncini had this insight, because for some reason he was working with, what's that skin disease, psoriasis, I think, and realized that that was a fungus, and then all of a sudden in a flash he saw that what we're dealing with is a fungal infection. And he says Candida albans, I guess, albicans, means white. And he would take these little cameras, there were some very interesting YouTube videos up, and he would show, he said the tumor or the cancer will always appear white, and then he talks about the different ways that he's able to get the baking soda solution to it, and that's what eliminates it. But I guess...
And he was curing people until Medical Association started coming down on him, because there's trillions of dollars made by chemotherapy and radiation and biopsies and all that other stuff that they do. If they realized that it was that simple, baking soda in water to kill cancer, then the big hospitals and big money pharmaceuticals would lose trillions of dollars. So they went after Simoncini big time.
And then he dropped out. He just quit for a while and went back to school and got a few more degrees, one in philosophy, and I think he studied quite a bit of law. And what's kind of interesting is in medicine you always hear about a remedy. Well, the same thing is true for law. You should be going into courts to be made whole. If you've been harmed, then you should find out who harms you, and the impartial judge should make sure that if something's been taken from you, property, whatever, by the who you're claiming is the defendant, then in order to be made whole, you get your remedy. So you can see that there's similarities in medicine and in law.
Right.
And Simoncini is that kind of a great mind. When you look at the book, towards the end of the book, it's very technical, kind of like written for doctors, that you get the feeling he thinks if they're never able to find him, because these doctors always have to be on the run because they're going up against a lot of lucrative industries. But the tragic thing is these lucrative industries are based on tremendous and unnecessary suffering. If people could just communicate and swap ideas and share therapies more freely.
And the longer they keep you sick, the more money they make. So they're not in a hurry for any cure.
That's what... Did you see Run from the Cure?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what Christian Lorette was telling me in Canada, how Rick Simpson was going to all the agencies, the Canadian Cancer Society and the UN, and he said all they wanted to do was run from the cure.
Yeah.
Yeah. By the way, Paula was the one that put up the full version of that because...
Initially,
yeah.
Initially, YouTube, you could only put up 10 minutes. But in those days, I was a public access producer, So they allowed me to put up unlimited lengths. And when what I was doing, I was working on a documentary for Dr. Jane Goldberg about low-level radioactive stones and the beneficial effects that it had on cancer and arthritis and so on. And when I started posting some of these discussions with the scientists, even though I wasn't making any money from my YouTube site, youtube.com/Paula Gloria, one wonderful benefit I had was I had all these subscribers and viewers who were like a research and development team, because they said, oh, if you think these radioactive stones are good, why don't you look at this? And at that time, I thought, marijuana was a bad thing. It alters your consciousness, and all the hard work you do meditating will be undone. But then I started to look at the patents, and I go, my goodness, this is incredible. Mm-hmm. And then I met Christian Lorette, who was a student up in Nova Scotia in filmmaking, and he wanted to do a documentary. So he was following up on what he was told, that there's a guy in town that's curing cancer with the essential oil of cannabis. And Christian initially went to Rick Simpson to expose the fraud. He said this couldn't possibly be so. And he was amazed at what he saw. And then Rick kept pushing him to take oil, even though Christian said, no, save it for the really serious cases. Yeah. Because Christian had very bad scoliosis and was in a lot of pain. And Rick kept saying, take more, take more. And I think after he took an ounce or so, he said his pain went away, and it stayed away for quite a while. But he felt after a few years, I guess the THC sort of leached out of his body, and the pain came back. And even though he was the great producer of this documentary, by this time, Rick had been seduced over into Holland to get the Cannabis Cup Award, and while he was gone, they came in and raided his place. So he wasn't very enthusiastic to go back, and Christian lost his oil. It was really wild. Here he was posting it on the internet. He was getting thousands of hits. Now it's well over 1 million. Yeah. But he couldn't get the oil himself.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he could only post 10 minutes at a time.
So he had it in 8 parts.
And then when he hooked up with Paula put up the full version. Now other people have picked up, and pulled it off and moved it onto their sites. I guess shared or whatever.
Yeah, now there's Google Plus. So the thing about Google Plus is it sort of gets people to use stolen traffic, and new time users to YouTube are so happy that they're getting this attention. But in truth, what's happened is it breaks the connection of the original content creator to their viewers. So in the past, I used to get these comments. Of course, with Run From the Cure, I could hardly keep up with it because it was getting to be so many hits. But still, it's very discouraging when you can't connect to your own content. And for me, what's so heartbreaking is I've got ads smeared all over my YouTube videos, and in particular, the one on Run From the Cure has all these ads for the American Cancer Society, who we know is all about squashing any cures for cancer because of their funding.
Sounds like they made a mistake of Run For the Cure to Run From the Cure.
Yeah. Well, that was a play on words.
That was a play on words. Right. They used to do Run For the Cure, right, and they would get people to run and donate money. And Rick said they're all running from the cure, so that's how they got Run From the Cure.
Well, a lot of people say that about the American Cancer Society itself, that they're cures you should run from.
Yeah, right. Right. By the way, Kim, you were speaking to Randy Steele, and she's the owner of this radio station.
Oh, hello.
Hi.
Randy, you, when Kim was talking about pooping out on 23rd Street on one of those original marches, did you make it all the way? Or did you join any of them ever?
Yes, as a matter of fact. Well, before I had a serious accident or two, I was a power walker for as many as 20 miles, so I used to enjoy all those marches back in the day.
Oh, a power march.
And I used to go to all the early ones. In fact, the actual first one in New York was in a marijuana rally in Tompkins Square Park. Right. I think it was either 70 or 71. And that was before the pot parade, just before, I think the pot parade started the next year. And that was quite fun. You know, Tompkins Square Park was a very interesting place in those days.
I know, I grew up there. I told you, I'm from Leroy Street. I was in the riot in '88.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, I used to work in radio there, and I used to go to the rallies to get sound to broadcast on the radio station I worked for at the time.
Cool.
How much coverage were they getting by media in those days?
It all depended on who was doing the coverage. So they would be shut out from many media sources. But if there were sympathetic people like me and other people in the media, we would make sure that it would get covered.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, back then, in the '80s, when I was coming up, a lot of the media coverage we had was for being in the New York hardcore scene.
The New York what?
The New York hardcore scene, like the CBGBs era, New York hardcore.
I see.
Yeah.
The Lower East Side.
I remember those days.
Yeah. You know, and a lot of the media coverage that we would get would be more exploitive than in favor of us.
That's true. That is absolutely true. We tried to counterbalance that a little bit on FM radio, but still.
Yeah.
Well, that must have been a double delight then that NY1 was so favorable, Time Warner.
Oh, I loved it.
It surprised me that they actually covered you. I figured they would cut that out.
What's even funnier is, I probably shouldn't even say this on the air, but Time Warner hired me to work in their sales department.
Oh, just recently?
Yeah.
Because of that?
No, before that. Like a couple of weeks ago, they hired me.
Do you think? Do you think that affected the coverage?
No.
They're probably looking at you to sell snacky cakes to stoners.
Right? They're probably gonna come try to hang out with me on the lunch breaks.
Wow, that'll be really interesting. Well, you know, I like to talk to everybody. I mean, I'm a public access producer, and I used to talk to the Time Warner cable people in the trucks, and they were all really nervous about this merger with Comcast because the Time Warner cable employees said that their union and Time Warner was being very good to them, but they were very nervous once the merger was in place what would be happening, because they were looking at the pattern throughout the country, and it was very bad. Similar to Central Hudson was sold out to Fortis of Canada a couple of years ago. And at first, you know, it looks like it's going to be okay for union people, but pretty quickly it's not okay, because when you're selling these, what really shouldn't be sold, like Joe said, it's like the butler selling your furniture while you go on vacation. There's certain resources that politicians don't own. It belongs to the people, so they shouldn't be selling it.
Right.
But the price goes up. You know, the electricity now is doubled. So we'll see. You know.
Well, people can barely survive.
That's what I thought you said so well when in the pot parade, when everybody was enthusiastic that, like Joe said, the wannabe activists, the novices, were saying, "Oh, just make it legal, and there'll be more money from taxes." You were saying this is the most. Well, we'll say it again. How you said it.
I forget exactly what I said, but I know that I said that marijuana law is an oxymoron.
Right.
It's an oxymoron. It shouldn't exist. You're not going to make taxes bleeding poor people.
Right.
You're not going to make tax money on $50 an ounce. What you're going to do is perpetuate the criminal persecution of the same dynamics that have always been criminally persecuted. it's not changing anything. It's just making dollars off of the rich people for the government.
That's
and
by
the same
design.
Poor people that have been historically incarcerated and had children and family issues, any type of adverse consequence for marijuana use are going to be the same exact people that are going to continue to have it, except it's going to be worse. It'll be on the federal level.
Yeah, and you know what Cuomo did? Cuomo saw that the legislature was getting ready to legalize marijuana here in New York State, and they were going to allow people to grow their own. So to keep that from happening, he passed this bogus medical marijuana bill, which is the worst medical marijuana bill of all the states in this country. New York has the worst medical marijuana bill of any of them. And
yes,
he
it does.
did that. He did that.
When they had the press conference here in Albany, I was at the Capitol. The Drug Policy Alliance was there. Compassionate Care New York was there. They had the patients with their children and the kid patients, and they were all there demanding that this law be passed. And Diane Savino gets up in front of the cameras. I had a sign that said, "Repeal cannabis prohibition, make it lawful, not legal," on one side, and on the other side it said, "Do not pimp the sick."
Yeah.
And I held it up, and everyone that had a blue Compassionate Care New York sign came and stood in front of me and pushed me behind the cameras where no one could see me. But what they didn't realize is I'm standing directly behind the camera next to the cameraman, and I know that the microphone was on. And they were interviewing Diane Savino, and she was saying something to the extent that the law wasn't ready to be passed, that when it was ready to be passed, they would pass it, but they're not going to pass it until it's ready to be passed. So I pleasantly yelled out from behind the cameras, "What's the matter? It doesn't exploit the sick or manipulate the poor enough?"
Wow.
Cassandra from the DPA grabs me and runs me into the bathroom, and she's like, "You can't do stuff like that." I was like, "Yes, I can."
It's called free speech.
Right.
I said,
it's called
"But you
free
know what?"
speech.
I said, "You know what?" And I just wound up, I left because I was so upset. You know, I didn't want to start yelling or making a scene. You know, I started feeling real emotional, like, wow, you're from the Drug Policy Alliance and you're telling me I can't speak the truth?
It's just what we call a normal clone.
Yeah,
right.
There's a whole lot of normal clones. The drug, what is it? The something policy?
Marijuana Policy Project.
Marijuana Policy Project. That's another group that's, as far as I'm concerned, they're working for the government. Normal, Marijuana Policy Project, and so many of these others. They're all saying what the government wants to be said.
Right.
Not what we're saying. We're saying free all marijuana prisoners, stop all arrests, and make the weed free for medical people to be able to grow it in their own backyard, and for recreational people to be able to grow it in their own backyard. And we don't want taxation and regulation. Taxation and regulation just means rules, so that if you break one of the rules, again, you're in court, going to jail.
Yep.
Joe, can I ask a question?
Of course.
Why can't you grow it in your front yard?
Well, because the neighbors will come and raid your pot.
Basically.
Are you familiar with the work of Dr. Tammy Brazil in Shasta County, California? She puts on a seminar at least once, possibly twice a year, called Canna We Talk?
No, I've never heard of her.
Oh, you should look up Canna We...
She's a sweetheart.
Canna We Talk too, and I think there's maybe 10 different talks there. Canna 1, Canna We Talk 2. And I think number 8 or 9 is Dr. Melamede. Do you know Dr. Melamede in Colorado? He's very well-spoken doctor.
He's a researcher. He's done the most research as far as doctor on marijuana, and he's got all the. he's a world of information for all the different cures for different diseases. And
just Google "Can We Talk To?"
I will.
And then I think on either 9 or 8. 8 is something called Team Landon, and it's this amazing woman whose 4-year-old got leukemia, and he dropped to half his weight and went through just unbelievable stuff of chemo and torture. And then, you know, just as a last-ditch effort, they try the hemp oil, and he starts to recover, and pretty soon he really essentially has recovered, but they cannot leave this alone, and they have to drill and do bone marrow and just to make sure he's absolutely cancer-free,
right,
until finally the mother just sort of sees through it all, somehow taps into some huge power, and sweeps all these nonsensical agencies aside who are only leading her son to more torture and not acknowledging the fact that the oil had worked. That's an incredible lecture. I think that might be Can We Talk number 8. It's called Team Landon. And then Dr. Mellamede.
Oh, Landon Riddle?
Landon, Landon, I think. Team
right,
Landon.
But Landon Riddle, his mother's Sierra Riddle?
Oh, is that it? I thought their last name was... I thought their name...
I've talked to her in passing. I actually recommended, I tried to connect her with Dave Mapes from Epsilon in Sacramento, who Epsilon Apothecaries, who is a THC medical and research development company.
So you know her and the 4-year-old?
I don't know her where I've sat down and shook her hand.
But you know the case.
Right, and we've interacted on Facebook between the two of us.
And
where I tried, because I tried to direct her, in the direction of a reputable person that is trying to cure people out of the kindness of his heart and not looking for money.
Right.
You know, this company, if product, I can't speak for him and what he does, but I suggest that people Google Epsilon, EPSILON, Apothecaries in Sacramento, and check out their website, because he's a great guy. He's, he really is. In my refill ventures, I've met quite a few people that are really here for the right reasons. They're not in it for government dollars. They're here to help people, regardless of their economics, regardless of their backgrounds.
Have you heard of Captain Cannabis in Colorado?
Yes.
Have you worked with him?
No, I haven't.
We were in touch with him a lot. We up until the feds came down on him, and he kind of went underground. But we were trying to get him to come to New York and do a TV show with us, and he was up for doing it up until they came down on him.
Well, it's like his results were so good that they had to, come swooping in. But I can't believe you don't know Dr. Mellamede then, because in Can We Talk To, I think it's number 9, the 9th lecture, he shows these amazing slides of this guy who had cancer on his head, and he went through all the chemo, and you see all how horrible it looks, and then they slather it with oil, and then it's like the skin on his skull at some point. You start to see his skull, but you can tell that it's starting to kind of dry up the fungal, the cancer, and it looks gruesome, but in a nice gruesome. You can see it's on the mend. And then he checks into the hospital for some routine procedure, and the computer screws up supposedly, and he's given an antibiotic which is lethal to him, and he dies from the antibiotic. And the oncologist was amazed. The oncologist never, and when you see those slides, Can We Talk To, if you Google, and it's number 9 for Dr. Mellamede. I think 9 or 10, somewhere around there.
What it is each number is a different person speaking on different points about medical marijuana. She's Dr. Tammy. She's a real sweetheart.
She's amazing. She's like the Dolly Parton of the cannabis movement. long blonde hair, and I think she had some life-threatening disease, and she turned around on cannabis. She wasn't so pro-cannabis, and then she saw what it could do, and now she calls herself the Queen of Dragons, and she works with angels on her elbows.
Awesome.
It's just a beautiful soul.
We were hoping we've done a couple shows about her. We were hoping to get out to California to do shows with her, but funding for all of us is always a big problem.
That brings up something. Dee Dee Halleck is an old-time public access producer since 1963, and we talked to her yesterday, and she was telling us about the Alliance for Community Media that's having its next, I guess they meet annually. And I just talked to Harold Channer today. He went to one of the meetings in Washington, D.C. in 2008. I think the Alliance for Community Media was started by George Stoney. He's a legend in public access. And Dee Dee is going to approach Jeremy Wilbur to see if Jeremy Wilbur will tap into the $150,000 a year that Time Warner gives to public access to send me and Joe out so we can cover this for the Woodstock area. She's convinced that we'll meet a lot of like-minded people. And she also talks about a guy named Bart Friedman, and he's got an exhibit now in New Paltz at the Dorsky Museum. And do you know who Bart Friedman is? Because he used to do something Pirate TV.
He was associated with the what was called Lamesville TV, which is right down the road. And they were the original video freaks with the old half-inch porta-packs, yeah.
Oh, tell us about that, because I'd like to know
Well, Bob
more.
Fast did a program that was on this station when that display, I guess it is, or program was going on at the museum in New Paltz. And I don't know a lot about him, but
it's still going on.
Yeah,
until
it was a big video freak convention, and he was involved in Lamesville TV, and then was it before or after Lamesville TV, they actually had a contract with CBS Television to do kind of a cinema verite show. And when CBS saw what they were going to put on, they canceled the project immediately. But nevertheless, I think they ended up with a studio in Lower Manhattan. I'm not the most expert on this. Dee Dee would know the story a lot better.
What Dee Dee was telling me is that he was saying that Saugerties has a beautiful public access facilities.
I've heard that.
Yeah. And she was very intrigued by the fact that the building where we live, the apartment building in which Joe and I and his son live, is in Saugerties, but across the street where the mailbox is Woodstock. So when it goes by the mailbox, we're Woodstock. But in terms of where we actually live is Saugerties. I would love to be able to get into those studios, but certainly I don't want to let go of any kind of claim I have on Woodstock, because obviously that's where our hearts are.
Talk to Nathan and Shelley about that when they get there.
Yeah. But she was saying that Bart was really longing for people to become more involved in the Saugerties public access. And by the way, Kim, do you know of anything going on in Albany with public access?
I don't. We started to look into that because we've actually been interested in trying to do some type of broadcast.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy
but we don't
to
really
do.
know how to go about it.
Okay, let me tell you.
And we also don't have the know-how in order to use whatever equipment's needed.
Well, let me tell you. Most public access stations, if anyone can go down and sign up and ask to be on public access. And then usually they will teach you how to run the equipment. And once you've learned, once they know that you know how to run the equipment, they'll give you your time slot and you got your show. We have me and Paula both have TV shows. Well, Paula lost her TV show, But for many, many years, she had a TV show down in Manhattan.
I didn't lose it. It was stolen.
Well, right. Oh, okay.
I was banned. I was banned.
But I still have my pot talk down there in Manhattan as well as up here in Woodstock.
And we got other producers to support us, so I'm able to use other time slots and to get the word out.
Yeah, but all you have to do is go down there and say, I want to be a public access producer, and sign up, and they'll they'll teach you how to run the equipment. And usually they'll say, do you want a half-hour show or do you want an hour show? And always ask for the hour show. And if you can get a weekly show, which down in Manhattan, some people can get weekly shows.
Daily or weekly?
I mean daily, yeah, daily shows. So if they have daily shows there, right away, ask for a daily show. Because once you get your show, like let's say you get a weekly show and you get 1 day a week, you got to. Then if you try to get a daily show, it's much harder to get a daily show once they've already got you in a slot.
But I didn't know that. I had a weekly show before I was daily. It's very hard to get daily shows, but definitely press for it. And
if I can just interrupt while we're on the subject of public access TV, we are hit by the clock as far as the TV station goes. So we have to give Woodstock Public Access TV back to the overnight carousel, where you never know what you're going to see. So if you want to hear the rest of the conversation that we're having, tune your FM radio to 104.1, Woodstock 104, and we'll join you then. So for now, it's good night from Woodstock 104 to Public Access TV Channel 23 in Woodstock.
Good night.
Good night.
And now this is WIOFLP, Woodstock 104. It's midnight, and we continue with Joe and Paula on Pot Talk.
And we're only going to go a couple more minutes here, maybe another 5 or 10 minutes, because we have other pressing engagements.
Okay. Now,
what, roll around in bed?
That's
pretty pressing.
Is it the same policy on a radio station as it is on like a public access TV station?
It's a whole nother universe. Here comes
yes,
Randy.
it is. I'll answer that because no, the FCC says that the licensee has to maintain control over the broadcasting, so we can't officially be open to anybody because management, which is in this case myself and Felicia and one other person, have to make the decisions as to whether something goes or not in order to comply with the FCC. So it's slightly different.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, radio's a little harder to get on if you just want to go down and say, I want a slot. You know, that
there is no public access radio. Is that what you're saying?
Right.
Well, we tried to get the Linda to let us at least interview with them on one of their DJ shows, and nobody even wanted to deal with us. Like, we didn't even get a call back. We contacted the parade and asked them if we could speak. I knew they weren't going to let us talk about about repeal. So I asked if I could have a few minutes in order to discuss jury nullification. And they said that they would forward my request and they would get back to me, and they never got back to me.
The circular file it was forwarded to.
Yeah, pretty much. You know, and I would have at least liked to have heard the jury nullification message presented on that stage.
That's a beautiful message. I mean, can I have Joe speak his experience with juries? He had two juries on his side.
We don't have time for us to go into all of that.
Okay.
But I've managed to win a couple juries way back in '74.
Upon which they're promptly dismissed.
Yeah. Awesome.
As soon as the judge saw that I was winning in the court case, he found a reason to dismiss the jury. It went through. Two juries were gonna let me go. Me and my wife at the time were gonna let us go. The judge saw that they were going to, and dismissed them. And then they picked a jury. Back then I was 24 years old, and they picked a jury that not one person on the jury was under 65.
Not his peers at the time.
Right, and that's what I said to the judge. None of them are my peers.
But when I see you again, I'll show these very moving letters that Joe's wife wrote to the judge, and Joe wrote to the attorney.
ACLU.
Yeah, the ACLU.
I told you about the ACLU. I was fighting a case on freedom of religion for marijuana, saying that it was a sacrament and it was part of my religious belief. And the ACLU, I had put in paperwork to ask them if they would take my case, and my case worked up to where they could only do, back then they only had a budget where they could do a $1 million case, only one a year. And my case worked up, and it was down to either taking my case on freedom of religion for smoking marijuana, or the Nazis' right to march in Stokey. And they took the Nazis' right to march in Stokey instead of marijuana for religious purposes.
Imagine spending $1 million.
If I would have won that case, and then anyone could say it was their religion, and it wouldn't be taxed. They could be smoking. That was my way back then. I mean, I do believe it's a sacrament. I mean, I always believed it was a sacred thing. But the reason I fought those cases is because I believed if I won on religion, they couldn't regulate it. They couldn't do anything, and anybody who'd said, well, it's my religious belief too, like the Rastafarians or the Zoroastrians or the Shivite yogis. I mean, there's quite a few groups out there. And anyone who would say it's my religion would have been free to smoke it or use it or for medicine. But they sabotage, the courts are corrupt.
Right.
I fought 6 cases on freedom of religion over the years.
Don't say that. Now I'm getting scared.
Scared of what?
Corrupt courts.
Of not getting to heaven?
No, not getting, not having the courts adhere to the
law.
To the law that's written. Yes.
Well, I think there's the court of public opinion, and if you actually look back when I go over Joe's paperwork, I mean, some of these transcripts are just. I fell in love with Joe when he and his son were arguing in front of Donald Williams. I'd never seen anything like it before.
You swooned.
Well, the logic was so stunning, and the way they stood up for their property, it's like the emperor is wearing no clothes kind of thing. People are saying this is crazy.
Watching Joe with a judge is absolutely a empowering experience.
Right.
Yeah, Randy's been to a few of our court cases.
I've never seen a judge shake and not be able to hold their papers still in front of a defendant before. Never.
Yeah. Well, I have this thing about judges. I've learned if a judge is a tyrant, right? Most people are really afraid of the tyrant, and they shake and they quake in front of the tyrant. I like to push him. I like to get him so pissed off and so crazy that they overstep the line. Like one judge, I said, well, Your Honor, I'm only here for marijuana, but you've committed felonies from the bench, That freaks him out, because now you're saying, I'm only here for marijuana, but you've denied due process, you've
equal protection, free speech,
right? And you'd be surprised when you push a tyrant too far, and they know that now they've put their neck in the noose. They start backing off, and they just want to get you out of their courtroom, and they don't care what it takes, even if it means letting you go. Quite a few times when I've gone into court and I've hit them with all my paperwork, because I studied a lot of law over the years, they start out, well, you're charged with a felony. And I say, well, I don't want to hear that. I'm not fucking pleading guilty to no felony. Oops, excuse me. I'm not pleading guilty to no felony. And then they say, well, okay, how about we drop it to a misdemeanor? And And I say, no, I'm not copping to a misdemeanor. And then they say, well, how about we drop it to a joint and $100 fine? And I say, no, I'm not accepting that. And then one judge over here in Saugerties, he said, I'm going to ACD it. That's adjourned contemplating dismissal.
Yeah.
And I said, no, that's unacceptable. I don't accept that. And then he slammed the gavel down on the thing and said, okay, we're going to take this to court in 30 days, and slammed the gavel down. That was just an act for all the other people in the court. And I never heard from him again.
But you know, Kim, I'm sure in your meditations you've been thinking deeply on all these issues. One reason I was really interested in going to the Alliance for Community Media is because Harold Channer was telling me, I don't know, something he saw on TV.
Harold Channer is the longest, oldest producer in public access.
In New York City. He's got a daily show. If you go to youtube.com/Harold Channer, you'll see all of his videos. But he was saying that a lot of eminent people in the economy were saying, we don't know what to do. And I'm looking through this great edition of the Woodstock Times. I think it's the April 23rd edition, I think, of the Karmapa on the front page. And then there's an article on the smart meters. Inside there's a lot of good articles and important articles, talking about how Jeremy Wilbur, the town supervisor, was telling Steve Romine, he's one of the producers on Woodstock 104, about what can he do about the smart meter situation. And you begin to see there's a commonality to all of these problems in that our economy is debt-based.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're going to need plenty of smart people, plenty of people of goodwill to sort of get us out of this hole, because the debt-based economy, in other words, currency, is backed by putting people into debt. We're passing IOUs around. Right. So the idea for me of an Alliance for Community Media is you could get people of goodwill and people who have hearts of a lion, in the case of those bureaucrats in government, who will come around and stand with reason you can't have fraud continue for so long because nothing is being produced, and right. You have the equity being sucked out, the life is being sucked out of our community because nothing's being produced, because people are jumping on all of these illusory methods of conducting financial things.
Right.
Okay, we're going to cut it off now, and stay in touch with us, and we're going to sign off now for Pot Talk. And,
all right. Well, thank you very much for letting me come on and talk. I really appreciate it, and thanks for introducing yourself to me, because I'm so happy to have met you guys.
Yeah.
And stay in touch. We'll be working together.
Yeah, we look forward to working with you, Kim.
So do we.
Okay. Bye.
Really. Thank you.
Have a good night.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.
And is that it? No closing comments?
Any closing comments?
Yeah. Free all the marijuana prisoners and stop any more from going in jail. All you people out there that are listening to this show, get off your butts and start telling the politicians enough is enough. None of the law, this medical marijuana law is a joke. We want all the prisoners freed. Marijuana's harmless, and we want them to stop all arrests. Come on, get off your butts and start busting the politicians' butts.
Or at least call Jeremy Wilbur and tell him to take the money that's supposed to be for public access that was put in the general fund so Joe and I can go to the Alliance for Community Media.
Even more important than that. Even more important than that. Tell Jeremy Wilbur to put the money into the television station up here. Woodstock should have a first-class television station, and put it up on the internet so people all over the world can see Woodstock television.
Thank you.
Okay, that's it.
Yep.
Oh, well, there it is. You've been watching and listening to Pot Talk, starring Joe Barton. Also starring Paula Gloria. Be sure to tune in next week at this same time to this same stone channel for more Pot Talk. No, not till later. Which is a Manifestation production. And at this time, Woodstock 104 concludes this broadcast day. Woodstock 104 operates on 104.1 megahertz, channel 281, with a highly effective radiated power of stupendous and angering to some 100 watts in circularly polarized stereo for your superior listening pleasure or angst. Antenna Higgett is still 920 feet above Andy Bully So Mean sea level. Woodstock 104 is owned and licensed to Birds of a Feather Media by a Federal Communications Commission, which is digitally demanding because it's a subsidiary of the Abomination. Woodstock 104 and Birds of a Feather Media is also licensed by the Secretary of State of New York to do business as Woodstock 104 for purposes of low-power broadcasting at Woodstock, New York. So be stupid and sue us. Let's see. Our snail mail mailing address is Woodstock 104, P.O. Box 104, Woodstock, New York 12498. This station operates in the public interest, convenience, necessity, and public good. So until tomorrow at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, with the best of whatever Pacifica programming we can cram down a network pipe, we will, and then smoke it, we will be back on the air tomorrow, much to the consternation of a few. And all we have to say to concert promoters out there is sweet dreams, Gary. And it's a warm night, so take the comforter off of the bed, have the sheet, and still you can cuddle, snuggle, and huddle, and remember, love. Good night, folks, from WIOFLP, Woodstock 104.